What is the crisis situation in the Indian farms? How the monsoon boom has become a fertilizer doom, and why our country is running out of fertilizers. Indian farmers are running out of fertilizers and they have already started running for it, scrambling for it. But even after a good monsoon, why there is a risk of food insecurity and a dip in food production? Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to understand this crisis of fertilizers which has arisen because of demand and supply mismatch. So when we talk about the situation that is at present, that is basically a crisis situation which has emerged because of simple mismatch of demand and supply. But the question is, why did this scenario come into place? What were the reasons that the demand increased? What were the reasons that the supply fell? And what are we looking at in terms of the crisis? So the crisis fact comes in from the very fact that because of the dipped supply, farmers are feeling a crisis situation, and that is why they are already queuing up to buy fertilizers. There is excessive panicking buying, which is increasing the sales and also demand, and furthermore there is a lot of pre-stocking and hoarding happening in this situation. Now this is the main situation which is present at front of us. Now this is the main situation which is present in front of us, but the whole scenario will become a broader problem if this is not addressed right away, because this will directly hit our Kharif output as well as food security and the price stability in the food as well. Now when we look at this given diagram right here, you will be able to understand that it clearly shows across the different fertilizers, be it urea, be it DAP, be it nitrogen, we have seen that there has been growth in terms of sale. But here we also get to see, as compared to the last year, the growth has been a lot more except for DAP, but it has very different reasons associated here. But when we talk about this growth in sale, what is the reason that farmers are all of a sudden demanding more of the fertilizers? Now we will be getting into that. Now why is there all of a sudden demand surge? The first reason is definitely a good monsoon this year, where we have seen a rainfall boost in North India, where in many parts it has led to flash floods and disasters. In multiple parts it has been a significant boost which will help the agriculture. For example, in June-August 25, we have seen 6.1% above normal. If we talk about May, we have seen 106% above normal, that is usually before monsoon. So this has made the farmers optimistic, and that has resulted in increase in rice acreage by almost 7.6% and maize acreage almost by 12%. Now another thing that needs to be understood right here with these two given crops, rice and maize both, in which the acreage has increased, these are the crops which have high nitrogen demand. Now that means they will need more fertilizer, and here the main nitrogen fertilizer is urea. That means there is more requirement of doses of urea per acre. And this is the main problem that we need to understand, because if the increase would have been in pulses or soy, then this issue of nitrogen, extra fertilizer would not have been required, because these are the crops which help fixing nitrogen in the soil. That's why they require lesser or almost no fertilizer. Now that is why we see a demand surge, because there has been higher fertilizer consumption, because two of the major components, first is irrigation, second is fertilizer, apart from the basic inputs, one has been assured. The second, that is what made the farmers optimistic. Now we have understood one part, that why demand is at rise. I hope we are clear with this. Now we will be moving to understand that what happened to supply. Why are we talking about a supply dip here? When we see demand is rising, production usually offers more supply because they are expecting profits. So what did happen to the supply? Now let us look into that. Now first of all, when we are talking about supply in a given country, there are two ways to fulfill that supply. Either the production, the internal production, is enough to fulfill that supply, or we are going to import. So when we look at the domestic production component, the problem starts there itself, because the production in domestic area has reduced. If we look at urea production, it has been only 93.6 lakh tons as compared to 102.1 that was last year. Second, if we talk about DAP, diammonium phosphate, we see flat production. That means as much it was last year, it is same. Now coming to the second component that we can import. So if we look at the import of DAP, that is diammonium phosphate, you will be able to find that the imports have also reduced. Now if we are looking at the main importer in this category, that is China, and this restrictions that have been placed by China in terms of exports from their country are responsible, one of the responsible reasons for the dip which we are seeing. Other than that, if you look at the next main fertilizer, that is urea, you will find yet again as compared to the last year, the imports I have again seen a huge dip, and this significant dip that we are seeing across the imports has led to a stock crisis, which is the main situation right in front of us. Because if we talk about urea stocks, they are somewhere around 37.2 lakh tons and barely half as compared to that was present in 2024, and that is what is the main reason of the supply and demand mismatch in the fertilizer industry as of now. The demand has increased, the supply has gone down, and that is why it is creating a panic situation for farmers who have already invested in the crops because of the good monsoon they had seen. And now the second major input they require, they are scrambling for it, and this needs to be understood and addressed by the government well in time, be it terms of importing more or addressing the domestic production, so that the food production this year does not suffer. Because as of now, Indian economy is already under the threat of US tariffs, finding new partners. In this, if the domestic production suffers, Indian economy is in for a difficult time. So what can be done to address these situations so that these situations do not arise in future? Now let us look at that. The simple first thing that needs to be understood is the fact that the forecasting needs to be better. That means there needs to be alignment with fertilizer supply with the expected monsoon and the expected cropping patterns. If the cropping pattern of this year, that the acreage in terms of rice and maize are going to be rice, would have been understood, then probably the fertilizer supply could have been addressed. Better and advanced stocking with reservoirs which can be maintained at a better capacity, then the demand will also surge in upcoming seasons. If the farmers are assured that their input requirements would be fulfilled, then they will have more optimistic production, they will produce accordingly, and the demand for the fertilizer will also rise. And the most important component that we need to diversify fertilizer use. There needs to be focus on better available fertilizers. For example, ammonium sulfate, which has N plus sulfur in place of urea, and promoting NPKS complexes, that is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur complexes, so that there is better use of nutrients and the soil is also well protected. Furthermore, in addition to making sure that the domestic production and understanding of cropping patterns and weather as well as the climate change is there, it is important to secure imports and reduce our over dependence so that we do not get supply shocks, and also maintain proper buffer via global partnerships, which is a good chance in front of us as we are trying to mend our ways and ask China to mend their ways in terms of deals. Other than that, the whole focus should be on the fact that there should be avoidance of any sort of panic shortages, where their shortages are not real time, but because people are stocking up, people are hoarding, that's why we see the shortage, and that can be only done when we have ensured farmers' confidence, and that will also translate into food security and price stability. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.